Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet of the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet, currently joining you from Jerusalem, Israel. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski, Anshe Chesed, New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island. It's great to see you. It's great that we're here. I think this is my third time probably doing Parsha Talk from Jerusalem. Barry, you did it once, I think, right? Jeremy?
Yeah, last year, 2 shows.
Yeah, this is the international version of the Parsha Talk. We're recording it a couple of days before the holiday of Shavuot. We are eagerly anticipating this event, including some other events which still have not happened yet, which we will leave blank right now. In the meantime, let's talk about Shavuot, because I'm sure the many listeners and viewers who are listening and watching us are interested in what we have to say about Shavuot, and that it is an eager anticipation, that we are counting down, as it were, through counting up of these 7 weeks. We're almost there. That in itself, I think, anticipates this moment. So I'm going to put out the topic Shavuot, which includes things like the Tikkun, things like Ma'amad Har Sinai, the receiving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and things like the custom of eating dairy. So I'm gonna randomly choose a subject or choose a person and say, pick a topic. Go ahead. Starting off with Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanowski.
Okay. Okay, I will. And it's something good and appropriate for you right at this minute, and for Yaakov and what's her name?
Gabi.
Gabi?
Gabi Wax.
Gabi Wax. So I know that my son, my oldest son, now 29 years old, Didi, was born on the 25th day of the Omer. His birth was on the Lag BaOmer. And so 29 years ago, the counting from Passover towards Shavuot took on enormous significance. We were counting down the days before our first child was born. So it signifies, in its ancient setting, the counting Tisperu Chamishim Yom, count 50 days from the day after Passover, the second day of Passover, until Shavuot. It signifies an agricultural reference. You're counting through this early phase of the harvest. What's the harvest going to be like? You are counting as we count as Jews, towards the holiday. There was about physical liberation at Passover, to the kind of spiritual affirmation that is receiving the Torah. You're preparing for that. But in my case, back in 1994, we're also counting the days till our baby was born. And you, right now.
So I'm counting the days.
Saba to be are counting down those days.
We'll only know, what day we were on in retrospect. But anticipation is really important. I mean, if you look back at the chapters in the Torah, chapter 19 and 20 of the book of Shemot, where God reveals the 10 commandments and speaks to the people of Israel, is there, what can you point to in terms of anticipation in those texts? I mean, if we do read, the Ma'amad Har Sinai episode on the holiday, it talks about 3 days, right? Be ready for 3 days. It says something that we would regard controversial, of course. Don't touch women, don't in the context, obviously, it's be focused and be absent from any kind of concern relating, of course, to the body, because something important is going to happen. And the important anticipatory event is that God is going to break through. And the whole idea that we've built, Judaism is built on God breaking through to humanity, or God breaking through specifically to the Jewish people. So I want to say there's a universal component to this, but a very particular component to this as well. And Barry, I want to get your reaction to that, saying, this is a covenantal moment that God is speaking, but I mean, the Midrashim, and of course, lots of Jewish thought has gone into the idea that this is a moment unprecedented in the universe that God kind of broke through. What do we say about that?
So I think I may have mentioned this before, but this is one of those years when I stopped counting the Omer on the second day. And the problem is Friday night. So
Yes.
most Friday nights I daven early, can't count the Omer until after Seder Kol Chavim, the stars go out. And a lot of times on Friday night I forget. And
Yeah.
it so happened that this year the Friday night was the second night of the Omer.
Right.
But the reason why I mention it is because the counting of the Omer, the way we do it, unlike the way that Jeremy has described it, is actually a spiritual counting of the Omer. Its sole intention is to link Pesach and Shavuot. And what I'd like to suggest is that Pesach is a holiday about spiritual freedom, about physical freedom, where Shavuot is a holiday of spiritual freedom. Spiritual freedom is identified with Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, which has to be received, not just given. And it seems that what we have on Shavuot is perhaps an inability to properly appreciate it if we don't count the Omer and link it with Pesach, that it cannot exist on its own. And the rabbis already suggest this by identifying it as Atzeret, the 50-day conclusion to the holiday of Pesach. They saw this as one long season. And it seems that this spiritual component requires a physical dimension as well. And therefore, what we have is not just the particular and the universal, which I'm not sure I entirely grasp, but I'll allow it because it allows me to emphasize another polarity, which is between the physical and the spiritual.
Interesting. Well, I'm relating to the particular and the universal only in the sense that in particular, so God is speaking to Bnei Israel as they are assembled at Mount Sinai. That's a specific moment, a specific place, a specific audience. And yet I'm very captivated by the Midrashim that say things like, there was complete silence in the universe. There was, the voice of God went from one end of the universe to the other. And it's like that this moment is unimaginable in the sense that it's a singularity. I'm probably using a wrong term here, but
I want to suggest a different reading. So one of the great midrashim is that all that was revealed was the first letter of the first commandment.
Yeah,
which is Aleph.
Aleph, which is silent,
which has no sound.
Yes,
but it's still vocalized in Hebrew because all letters in Hebrew have a sound. There really are no silent letters as we understand them,
right?
Because that makes no sense in the Hebrew language. Yeah. So there is something about Shavuot and about the Torah that exists in at least two different dimensions. We can't make sense of it if we only focus on one.
Right.
And, one of the things we were talking before we started recording about how the Tikkun Leil Shavuot has become popular in the last few hundred years, perhaps because of the introduction of caffeine to the modern diet. But I wonder how many of the people who actually participate in the Tikkun, which, as we discussed before, is not limited to religious people, actually count Omer. And in other words, does Shavuot for them exist as a one-off holiday, or do they actually see it as complementing and completing Pesach?
So I certainly think that it's become popular in the sense that it's an evening. It's an unusual kind of evening. I mean, it's staying up all night or building programming. Some shuls are creative in doing programming before the evening. Some we'll do mini tikkuns. I think over a couple of years ago we spliced it out over a couple of days. I mean, it is a marathon to do. I mean, it's not easy to stay up all night to pull an all-nighter. We used to do that in college all the time when you had an essay due. But it's hard. You get pretty shattered afterwards. I don't know. And the last time I did a full tikkun was many years ago because on Shavuot we have to function as a pulpit rabbi. and the people that are older come to shul and have, the luxurious long davening, and so they hear the learned words. We do teach, and we do enjoy talking about the theme of similar to the themes that we're talking about now. But the idea that there's a special event going on. Look, I'm sitting in Jerusalem. There's a map of every tikkun taking place. In Jerusalem, there are dozens of these events. Hundreds and hundreds of people will be out in the middle. It's really a happening event, and all across Israel, especially Tel Aviv, there'll be a secular tikkun where people are gathering to study. What an amazing thing! I want to say in the kind of the exhilarating way. What other people does this kind of thing? Let's make an evening that everybody stops and studies something, and call that an experience. I think it's phenomenal. That alone, I think.
Well, it certainly is a phenomenon.
Yes, and it's fun, and does it change anything? No, it's about an experience that puts you in contact with something larger, and whatever the themes that we choose to teach on this evening, they tell us that we're part of a literary tradition, a textual tradition, and we're all reaching for something, not only answers, but we're reaching for the ways to express some questions. And we have some big questions, I think.
See, I think that this part that you're saying right now is really critical. I don't, with Judaism, I find myself especially explaining to people who are converting. Judaism is a variety of things. Like, I think Christians understand that Christianity is a religion, and it's a teaching about God, and it's teaching about metaphysical things and ethical things. It's got social dimension, but it really is in a matrix of sacred scripture, sacred behavior. Judaism is that stuff too, but it's also like a deeply ethnic, experience, and a deeply ethnic, like you're part of this you're part of this international people. You have its history, you have its language, it's a relationship to a certain kind of place. All these things are true. I spent all these years, I basically tried to, these years that I've been working in the rabbit, I was like, we have to remember this. Judaism is not just bagels. It's not just, whatever kind of specific kind of Jewish humor. It's not just the experience of Eastern European Jews, which let's remind ourselves that there's lots of Jews. Even most Jews are not Eastern European Jews, and we don't want to be too, Ashkecentric here. And then lo and behold, in the last few years, because of the increasing multiracial quality of Judaism and the multi-ethnic quality of Judaism, and so many people coming in from not having been born into Jewish families, and so you no longer feel like Eastern European, that's the thing. Now I feel a little bit of the diminution of those ethnic things that I regard as precious too. But Shavuot is great, at least partly because this one really is the religious holiday. This one is the cultural holiday, because Passover, it's deep associations with your family Seder. It's a real family holiday. It's the high holiday of the home. Sukkot is a joyous time coming on the back of the high holidays. It sometimes has a particularly social feel to gathering in Sukkot. And this one, because everybody who observes it, to whatever degree you observe it, if it's going to a tikkun, if it's going to synagogue to hear the Ten Commandments, if it's counting the Omer on your way there, which I agree with Barry, is a really, really critical enhancement in the anticipation factor. But when you come to these tikkunim, where you study whatever you study, you are saying this is a sacred literary heritage, sacred ideas, sacred books, and you're engaging with them. So I feel great about Shavuot as a holiday of, a holiday of the book for the people of the book.
A holiday of conversation, and a holiday of chavruta, and a holiday that enables you to disagree with people and yet share in the commonality. I mean, that's what study of Torah really is. I mean, it's when you think about it, this is the way that we build the people is through the respectful dialogue and disagreement, and the explanation, and thinking about all the different kinds of interpretations of. Today I was trying to make the connection between Sneh and Sinai. I'm trying to prepare a sheet on Sinai.
It's bush league stuff, though.
It's bush league stuff. So
That's the real etymology, of course. That's the
it
real
is a
etymology.
real
Remember,
etymology.
at the end of you've got those other midrashim we were talking about of other word plays, but at the end of the Torah, where we have, we read it on Simchat Torah, we don't even read it on a Saturday cycle, but it's Ritzon Shochni Sneh. God is described as the one who dwells in the bush, and it's got to be the case that the Sneh that Moses goes to see, and then God says at the burning bush, "You're going to come back here and worship me here." It's got to be the Sneh mountain, and that's Har Sinai.
So the article that I was reading on this put forth a theory that hasneh as opposed to sneh, it's the sneh, meaning in a way a collective, like hatzfardeya, the frog, meaning a big, huge. We have this image that Moses sees a little bush and it's on fire, but this writer was saying that no, it's the whole mountain on fire. It's a whole and it's a kind of anticipatory scene of Sinai, because Sinai is the mountain is on fire, and the mountain is not being consumed when it's on fire, and Moses has that.
I think the Grateful Dead goes to that too.
The what?
The Grateful Dead, fire on
fire on the mountain.
Okay. All right.
That's not what they meant. But can we just do one more thing about the same mountain for a second? We talked about, so that's super dramatic, right? The whole mountain is,
fire.
It's burning up to the heart of heaven, and that's super dramatic. And this mountain is like a big mountain, so big inner importance, not necessarily Rocky Mountain, not necessarily Everest. As a matter of fact, by tradition, it's not such a big mountain, and the bush is not such a sequoia tree, such a redwood tree. It's a little bush. And there's something great about Moshe recognizing the smallness of the bush deserves attention. Moses' greatness is he recognizes in this unassuming little bush, little scrubby thorn bush, that the divine presence is radiant in there. And then he goes back to the mountain and brings the people, and maybe that's the same thing. But then in Melachim, first Melachim Aleph, chapter 19, Elijah's running away from Ahab, and he goes back to that same mountain. And that's this amazing scene where, God says, "Come out." He's hiding in the cave. God says, "Come out." And past it, first there's a great wind, and God's not in the wind, and a great earthquake, and God's not in the earthquake, a great fire, God's not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice, Kol Dmama Daka. And that's a kind of revelation that really we can really relate. I think I can really relate to revelation, not necessarily being in thunder, but in silence. Like, we talk about all the revelation is just the first silent aleph, as we were saying, that's Elijah's revelation. Just the still small voice, or Kol Dmama Daka, actually is maybe the voice of subtle silence. Not still small voice, but the voice of subtle silence. That's beautiful. I could relate to that.
But isn't it interesting that that's the complete counterpoint to Exodus 19:20? That there's great blast of the shofar, Moshe Daber Yanenu Bakol, that God will answer him in a sound, and that the people can't really hear, or they can't discern what is being said to them. I mean, that whole experience is an impossible experience, and so maybe we need the smallness. I mean, when people have, it's interesting how people do still have their spiritual moments in silence, unless they go to a Springsteen concert. I guess I don't know.
So what I want to suggest is that there's a kind of poetry in the Sneh and Sinai because I think properly the bush is a small bush, and the mountain, however we're going to configure a mountain, is certainly larger than a bush. And it's all about one's perspective. When Moses turns aside to look at the bush becomes the entire mountain, because in it he sees God.
Interesting.
And I think it's important to recognize here that revelation, I mean, you use the word conversation or dialogue because revelation demands a response. The question is often asked, does God speak in one voice at Mount Sinai, or does he speak in every voice? And how critical is the response of the people to make God's word revelation? God could speak into the vacuum. That's not revelation. If no one hears his word, what has been said?
What has been said?
And I think that one of the things we need to remember when we read the Torah on Shavuot, either day actually, that the voice of God demands our response. And so even though the people are petrified in the image that we get in the Torah, that's part of their response, and that's what makes a revelation.
I want to say that that's probably one of the reasons why Shavuot, among the holidays, is the least popular, because
it's the most misunderstood.
The most misunderstood holiday. I think that it's a 1 day, 2 day holiday, and I think the idea that revelation demands a response is deeply unsettling for many people. I think many people, to be challenged by God in this way, just say leave me alone. I can be challenged by glimpses, okay? I can be challenged by...
No, you could think, though, that on Sukkot, all you really need to do is sit in the sukkah.
Yes.
On Pesach, in a sense, all you really need to do is eat matzah. But on Shavuot, you have to respond to the voice of God. That's
Indeed.
what's unsettling.
It's very unsettling. It's very difficult. Well, maybe it's easier to talk about food. Let's talk about food for a second, because we do have dairy associated with Shavuot. I would propose that probably has an early strata of meaning, connecting Shavuot to manna and to food, and that Shavuot, being a holiday that celebrates the harvest, transitions Israel away from its dependency on God for heavenly food, which is white and sweet, to grain. And so it commemorates the manna. And eating of dairy, in a sense, ought to give you an echo of this great miracle that accompanies Israel through the desert, in the same way that Sukkot commemorates the miracle of God's hovering over the people, protection, in the same way that Passover commemorates the miracle of the Exodus. So Shavuot is a manna holiday, and of course we have the other tradition that this was before the giving of the Torah. The people had to prepare if they had no way of knowing the laws relating to kashrut, and so therefore they only ate dairy as to prevent themselves from any untoward violation of a kashrut law. But it's evolved to us.
Nice little. That's a great little drash, humorous, about they don't know kashrut, so that's why they have to
eat dairy.
It's of course not the reason, but it's fun.
It's fun, yes.
They also only waited 3 hours. We should add that as well.
It makes me think, by the way, like how many of our customs are located in the world's, the other cultures and the world's folklore. And Purim is our spring carnival, and everybody's got their spring carnival. Everybody's got their Mardi Gras. All peoples and their ethnicities have their Mardi Gras, and our rituals, our wedding rituals, and our Hanukkah is our winter solstice rituals, and all religions and all ancient peoples had their winter solstice rituals. It makes me think, and I simply don't know the answer, but intuitively, I bet you that there's something about the birth of spring lambs and the birth of spring cows that other cultures also have a dairy thing in the sort of late spring, early summer. That's just a guess, but it just intuitively, I think that makes sense.
Pesach is the lambing festival, because you eat lamb on Pesach, would Shavuot have been a dairy because of dairy product? Yeah, good guess. We'd have to kind of think about that.
Let's ask the wilderness
My
cook.
wilderness cooking guy, right? No, but what about food associations with holidays and the fact that does certainly make it fun, it makes it joyful, it brings it into the kitchen, it communicates any number of messages. There is information in cooking, obviously, and
Food is culture. Food is culture in the deep way. But by the way, I'm a big fan of the writer Shai Agnon and Agnon's great story Hag Sameah, the science. It's a wrenching, terribly painful story about his observance in Shavuot when he's learned it's got to be 1943 or yeah, it's probably 1943 on Shavuot. He has learned that Buchach has been overrun by the Nazis. His town in Galicia has been overrun by the Nazis, and as he does every Shavuot, he stays up all night and recites the poems of Ibn Gabirol. And in this story, Gabirol comes to him and writes a poem in an elegy for Buchach, which he forgets. It's just this great symbol of the inaccessibility of memory. But in the course of that story, he has this great line. He says, and I'm sure you've heard the joke before, but and maybe he didn't make it up. Maybe he heard the joke before too. But it's great. In Sukkot, you get to eat what you want, but not where you want. In Passover, you get to eat where you want, but not what you want. And in Shavuot, you get to eat what you want, where you want. Best holiday.
Well, there's something to be said for that. I mean, even those of us who don't eat dairy, and there may be many viewers and listeners who, for one or another reasons, either because of their dietary proclivities or their lactose intolerance, find this holiday to be somewhat difficult.
So,
however, we could be very creative with that.
A question for you though, Elliot, as a vegan, do you actually have food associations with the various holidays? Since obviously you don't have the traditional ones of meat or dairy.
So I don't get too wrapped up in it. It's still a kind of curiosity. For example, on Pesach, we'll have a roasted beet on the plate, the Seder plate, as opposed to a shank bone. I'm kind of happy about that. I don't want to be too, fervent about it. And in the vegan world, there's so many different substitutes now for dairy. It doesn't even matter at this point.
No, it's not that. But in other words, I think that in my family, certainly there are specific foods associated with the holidays. So we always have stuffed cabbage on Sukkot.
Yeah.
And mushroom barley soup.
No, it's been flattened for me. I mean, we've become very eclectic in our menus.
So it'll be interesting to see if over time you develop certain associations to give, because as Jeremy said, food is culture.
We do, for example, for the Tikkun, we have a Sunday, ice cream Sundays. Since when is that a traditional food? Cheesecake maybe, a blintzeh maybe, a cheese Danish maybe. But and the fact that all of these are associated with the holiday, I think adds just a layer of joy and another layer of soluble fat.
Well said.
Well, this is a perfect. Your manna association is right on target. Et asher efu tofu.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the verse says. Whatever they bake, they bake. Et asher efu tofu. That's what it was. It was tofu. So we waited for hundreds and hundreds of years to realize the proper interpretation of manna. From now on,
well, tofu is a white substance, and you can also make some very interesting frozen desserts.
You can make anything with it. You can make anything.
We've moved to cashew milk and coconut milk.
You add salt.
What's that?
I've been making tofu because D and Ariel are. No, you froze. Didi and Ariel, they're not total vegans because they're ovo-lacto. Dasi eats fish, but she doesn't eat meat. Shai is like Didi. So I've been, sprinkle a little cornstarch and spices on tofu cubes and roast that baby up. It's yummy.
It's very, very delicious. It's very delicious. And so as I said, between coconut milk, coconut cream, cashew milk. I make an ice cream. I'm telling you, it's to die for or to die from. I don't know.
From.
I hope you're able to tell the difference between the
I hope
two.
so. But we we're coming to the end of our little time together, and just thinking about these serious themes and about Jewish peoplehood, the connection to Torah, and the invigoration that I think we all get through the study of Torah. And I think if there's one message of Shavuot, it's that, and if there's something that we could convey to the people watching us who have been so devoted to us, it's like, pick anything. I mean, what would you tell someone who said I want to study something, and I'll start and say, look, what would I tell you? I love this exercise, which is pick a verse from every parsha, or maybe pick a verse from the first 4 parshiot or 6 parshiot of Breshit, or pick a verse from do a random selection. Take the 7th chapter of every book of the Chumash and read it just randomly, or roll the dice, that kind of thing, and you'll never guess where it takes you. The serendipity of the study of Torah is awesome, especially when you are connected to someone else. And I think that's really the message. It's we can all read books and we can all ask questions of ourselves, but it's HaTorah ena niknet ela b'chavura. You acquire Torah in a community, or in the smallest community that you can imagine, which is more than one, basically. Unless,
because the Torah is actually in between.
Yeah,
it's not with one or the other, and that's what we have to remember on Shavuot.
Indeed. Jeremy, what would you, if someone said to you, tell me something to do to enhance my Shavuot, what would you tell them in terms of study?
Well, in terms of study, I don't know. I think you can only learn where you want to be. So it would seem to me that there's going to be people for whom poetry is it, or history is it, or theology is it, and I would say you have to go do your thing. But if I were to play, I would say perhaps that the Pesikta de Rav Kahana is an ancient midrash of synagogue homilies in the land of Israel, has a spectacular collection of stuff about the different things that people heard, and how each dibur came to people in their own way, and they heard it with their own unique experience, and that Kol Adonai b'koach, the voice of the Lord comes in the strength, in which they read is b'koach kol echad ve'echad, according to each person's capability, which I think is pretty great. Like everybody, there's one divine revelation, but there's an infinite number of refractions through human experience. I think that's
Right.
a message that I would want to give people for Shavuot.
Absolutely. Everybody has an ownership. Everybody, it's like, this is your birthright. This is your inheritance. You own this. This is yours.
You got this.
One of the single most important teachings of Torah is that don't be intimidated by it, and let either a serendipity guide you, or let or feel drawn somewhere. Let yourself be drawn into it, and you'll experience some joy, I think. And of course, a blinza also wouldn't hurt.
Wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Wait. I think there's a cow release tradition in Sweden. The cows have been in the barns all year, and in the spring they let the cows out of the barns, and it's a big kind of folk festival, and they drink milk. So
there you go.
The
Shut down on
Swedes,
that note.
the Swedes have it and reinforced my intuition.
There you go.
So it's just Norse mythology.
Have a sweet
And
Shavuot.
internet is not well known, but the land of Israel and Sweden are actually very close.
There you go. There you go. Right.
Etymologically, Yisrael, Sweden.
You see where Torah takes us? You'd never know this. At any rate, we are come to the end of our time together. It's been great. We want to thank our viewers and listeners for spending this time for us. We wish everybody a beautiful Shavuot. Whatever you're studying, whatever you're doing, enjoy it, rejoice, stay up a little bit, stay up a lot, eat some dairy or make believe dairy, and enjoy the Chag. And we'll see you again on another edition of this wonderful Parasha Talk. Thanks for watching, and Hag Sameah.
Hag
Hag
Sameah.
Sameah.
Shalom.